Last year, Dave was very high on Brock Bowers. Liked him as a late-round pick. Who is this year's Brock Bowers? He may not exist, but we still have good late-round tight ends for you right now on FFT Express. Bring in the whisper back. Sorry, eye roll from Dave. He didn't like it. Dave, let's talk about some late-round tight ends. Is there a possibility of another Brock Bowers-like impact from a late-round tight end this year?
I don't think there's going to be another tight end that can do what Bowers did. He averaged 15 and a half PPR points per game. He was getting 8.7 targets per game. I like a lot of tight ends late on draft day. I don't think any of them can touch what Brock Bowers did as a rookie. But that being said, one of the draft strategies that I've gravitated toward this year is taking two tight ends late. And the reason why is because ADP favors it. And there's a lot of exciting talent where you hit on just one of the two, you're good. If you miss on both, it's not that big of a deal because these are late round picks. We're talking round 8 and later. If you miss on them, you can go to the waiver wire and pick up somebody else. But I've got enough names. I could go longer than 8 minutes on the number of tight ends that I think have a chance to help you out that you can find in round 8 or later. So the great or late strategy that you created for tight ends, I think this year it's just better to veer late rather than spend the early draft capital on somebody who's great.
Okay. So who are those players? Who would be at the top of your list?
Let's start with Tucker Kraft of Green Bay. Been singing his praises since the day the season ended. One of the most efficient tight ends in fantasy, really in the NFL. Just didn't get a lot of targets last year. I think that changes. I think there's a chance he could finish second on the Packers in terms of targets because of that efficiency, because of what he can do after the catch. That's reminiscent of George Kittle. And maybe the Packers coaching staff didn't want to put that much on his plate last year. I think they might this year. And I know that just drafting Matthew Golden makes it tough to really believe that they'll do that and that Kraft can be a much bigger part of the offense. You're only looking for 6 targets per game. You don't need to get more than that. I think that Kraft can come through in the neighborhood of like 10 and a half PPR points per game, 11 PPR points per game, and you're drafting him late, and that's fine. And last year, with minimal target volume, he averaged 9.6. So I think the soon-to-be 25-year-old is one of the very first tight ends that I would look after in that great or late strategy. The next one is, if there's a guy that is a rookie that could come close to doing what Bowers did, I think it's Tyler Warren. I know that no one wants to draft somebody on the Colts. This is the guy to draft on the Colts. I think he could finish first on Indianapolis in targets and catches and receiving touchdowns. I think he's that good. Physical player, not necessarily a burner, but certainly somebody that can make plays after the catch. He gets carries, or at least he got carries at Penn State. I think they could use him in such a role sparingly in Indianapolis, but it wouldn't surprise me if he had a rushing touchdown on top of 6 or 7 receiving touchdowns this year. And I think with Daniel Jones taking over at quarterback, if that lasts the majority of the year or the entire year in Indianapolis, I think that opens up Warren's upside just a little bit more because the rushing threat from the quarterback position isn't as major as it would be with Richardson. Plus, I think Jones is just a slightly better thrower than Richardson at this point. I have done drafts where I get Kraft and Warren, one of them in round 8 or round 9, the other one in round 10, round 11, and I'm good. I love that duo. Getting one of those two tight ends is on my draft plan for this year.
Okay, Tucker Kraft and Tyler Warren. So those are two guys that Dave wants to draft. If not just one of them, how about both of them? We're going to take a break and talk about some more late round tight ends that could make a difference for your fantasy team. We'll be right back. All right. So after Kraft and Warren.
Both of whom, by the way, have an ADP on our fans only mocks after 100th overall. Let me give you a name of somebody who's going before them in our mocks. Maybe you've heard of Mark Andrews.
Yeah.
At the ADP, I can't fight you on it. If you're getting him at the round 8, 9 turn for somebody who's been the BFF in the end zone for Lamar Jackson, literally Lamar's entire career, I can't tell you that that's a bad pick. That's good value. And you could draft Andrews and one of these other young tight ends and feel really good about down drafting. And where were we drafting Mark Andrews last year, Adam? It was like round 6, 5.
I don't even
remember. More in that range. This is a dip. This is a discount. I love it. So Andrews is also on the list of late round tight ends. So is Evan Engram, who kind of like we soured on him last year, and we knew he wouldn't be as good as he was toward the end of 2023. Didn't even average 10 PPR points per game in Jacksonville, 7.1 targets per game. Now he's in Denver. Now he's got a chance to be the number 2 target getter for the Broncos from Bo Nix. And Sean Payton has been looking for one of these mismatch type tight ends. He tried plugging in a bunch of different dudes into that role last year. None of them really panned out. I think Engram can pan out. And this might be his last best year. I would call him a big time sleeper and somebody who's absolutely worth taking after 100th overall. I would say my excitement level for tight ends after that group does go down just a little bit, but not too much. Colston Loveland deserves to be spoken about because he's a great receiving tight end. At least he was at Michigan. Reminded me of Darren Waller when I watched him. So if you have the chance to draft the next Darren Waller, I would say you go ahead and do that. I worry about Loveland getting the type of target volume that Evan Engram's going to get, that I think Tyler Warren's going to get, that I think Tucker Kraft is going to get. And that's what holds me back. I don't know if he can put up 6 touchdowns and be a solid fantasy tight end without averaging 6 targets per game. That's something that I'm concerned about. Next year, Colston Loveland's going to be on everybody's breakout list. But this year, I might put him behind every name I've given you so far. In fact, I would.
What about a couple of former first-round picks in the NFL draft who have disappointed thus far in their careers? Kyle Pitts and Dalton Kincaid.
I was off of Pitts last year. You know this. And there's no reason for me to change the tune now. I hate seeing it because Pitts was such a great athlete at Florida, but he really just hasn't been able to turn the corner in the NFL. And I wonder how much more patience this iteration of the Falcons coaching staff has for him when the last iteration of the coaching staff did not have much patience for him at all. He's never averaged 10 PPR points per game as a rookie. It's semantics. He was just under there. But after his rookie year, 7.6, 8.1, 7.7. This is a waiver wire tight end.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the difference. He's you may not even have to draft him. So
right. So that's one guy. And then the other name you gave me was
Kincaid.
I really thought Kincaid was going to break out last year. And what ended up happening was the Bills just kept running the football. And I don't see Buffalo really changing that. I think they're still going to be very run-centric. Cook is going to get his. If it's not Cook there, I still think they're going to try and run the ball. And, of course, Josh Allen does his thing. I think Kincaid's got a long way to go. I know he was playing hurt last year. I would rather speculate on a late-round pick with Kincaid than I would Pitts. Give me Kincaid as someone just to sit on my bench and see how the season starts to unfold. We know he's got great receiving potential. He kind of falls into the same bucket as Loveland, much more of a receiving tight end than a complete all-around type of tight end. But if you're not getting target volume and if you're not getting end zone targets, you're not going to help us in fantasy. And that's exactly what happened to Kincaid last year.
And last thing I want to say is we did a startup dynasty draft last week, pardon me. We did one last year too. But let's talk about the one from last week. If you're in a startup dynasty draft Isaiah Likely. He's one of my last picks. And he's so good. And I don't think Mark Andrews, there's a good chance Mark Andrews is playing his last year for the Baltimore Ravens. So if Isaiah Likely were to get that opportunity, I think he'd be fantastic with it. So in Dynasty, I think it's a pretty valuable asset.
25 years old, absolutely has a bright future. It's just a matter of, okay, let's just pretend Mark Andrews retired yesterday. Where would we put Isaiah Likely in our rankings, knowing that he's a fantastic athlete? Again, just like Loveland and Kincaid, much more of a receiver than a blocker. What would his volume be in this iteration of the Ravens offense, given that they like to run the football a lot? And they've not only got Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman, they added DeAndre Hopkins, who we're not necessarily loving for fantasy anymore, but he's going to take work away. I don't know how consistent Likely would be, but as a late round pick in Dynasty, absolutely fits the bill. So does Elijah Arroyo. Ben Sinnott is in the exact same spot as Isaiah Likely, and he's 2 years younger.
Yeah.
And I got a funny feeling that Cole Kmet's career isn't done. It might be done in Chicago, but he's only 26. That's a guy who could have a rebirth on a different team sooner than later.
For the record, I think if Mark Andrews retired today, I would have Likely as tight end 6.
There's
like
no
that.
way.
Oh, 100% I would.
You would take him over the likes of Kelsey.
Yeah. I mean, you'd be right
No,
there.
I couldn't do that. Not in full PPR.
I mean, if you look at Andrews, the one game without Likely, he got a lot of targets. Likely a couple years ago without Andrews was really good. Likely's, I think, a stud. I mean, they're talking about him. They want him to be an All-Pro this year. So it's a fun topic that doesn't really matter.
Coaches say a lot of things this time of year.
No, he's not going to be an All-Pro, but they obviously believe in him.
Do you remember how excited John Harbaugh was over Rashad Bateman this time last year?
And Bateman had a good year, but
how many times did you start him on your fantasy team?
No, but there's not enough pass volume. But if you take Mark Andrews off the team, then all of a sudden you've got some. He played at the end of 2023 without Mark Andrews, and I'm just looking at his game log: 19.3, 18, 8.6, 18.2, 11.1, 11.4, and then I think Andrews came back for that last playoff game against the Chiefs, and it was only 3 targets. But anyway,
Andrews averaged 4.1 targets per game last year.
I did this math last week because we had a mailbag question.
Okay.
Likely played every game but one. When you looked at what was the date of that? So that would have been the 13th. Let me see if I can find this. You're going to be kind of amazed by this, I think. Nah, I can't find it. Oh, it's the 12th. When you looked at when they were on the field together, they had almost identical stats, Likely and Andrews. So I'm not saying that you would double their stats.
You can start with targets. Likely averaged 3.6 targets. By the way, who averaged more PPR points per game last year? Isaiah Likely or Kyle Pitts?
Likely.
By 1/100th of a point.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying Likely I think would be great without Andrews.
I don't know if he'd be top 6 great, but top 12 great, no argument out of me.
Cut it in.
Maybe probably top 10.
Yeah, you're almost there. You're almost at 6. Okay.
We're splitting hairs.
A little bit.
I think we found a way to put that puck right between the legs of Stuart Skinner.
There we go. We'll talk to you tomorrow on FFT Express.